I served with our candidate for Congress. We had the good fortune to work on education issues together, to work on health care together. All I could say is Elizabeth Esty gets it. And the reason why she gets it is because she has integrity. One of the hardest things to do when you're a legislator is to sometimes say no to your leadership, is to sometimes stand alone and to take that hard vote, knowing that at the end of the day it might hurt you with even your own constituents that you represent. As a state representative who represented Cheshire in that horrible, tragic tragedy that took place, unlike her opponent, she stood and stuck with her principles to be against the death penalty. Whether you're for or against the death penalty, that's not the point. The point is that she had to look at her own moral compass and make a decision, even if it cost her the election. That's who we want as our congressman from the 5th Congressional District. Because when it comes right down to it, she represents us. And she goes to Washington. And I know that that's, the congressman can say more, but that's a tough place. I'm sure it's much tougher to keep your feet on the ground and keep rooted, as Pastor Pitts said this morning, to keep rooted in D.C. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce my good friend and our next Congressman, Elizabeth Esty.
Well, thank you so much and appreciate your coming out this afternoon. I'm really glad people had something to eat. I have teenagers, and I know, and I'm glad you availed yourself of the opportunity to eat first. I feel incredibly honored to be here today, and first I want to thank you, Pastor, and to the whole Mount Pleasant Zion community for welcoming us here today. Thank you. Papa Gardner, to Pastor Pitts, to Reverend Bush, wherever you may be. I really want to thank you and all of you who took time here. Jason Bartlett is the definition of a stand-up public servant. He is. I did have that opportunity to serve with him, and we both represented kind of tough districts where we were called on often to take positions that weren't always popular, but we knew to be right. We knew to be right for our children. We need to be right for our communities. And it is a challenging time. I think with what we've seen this week, with the literal storms that swept across this country, 60 million people in the path of this giant storm. And if you think and contrast what happened this week with what happened in Katrina, under a different leader for our country, a different vision of whether government stands with people and by people and for people, or whether we just contract it out to some public, some private entities who maybe get the trailers there, or maybe don't. Maybe the trucks show up, maybe they don't. Or a leader, like our president, and I have framed the ballot with my name on it and Barack Obama's name. And yesterday, actually, we had a rally, and I have my cutout of Obama. So I have my picture in the paper with my cutout of Obama. It would have been lovely to get him there in person, but I'm hoping to have that opportunity in January to have my picture actually with our president. I feel so strongly about this in part because I come from a long line of feisty women. My great-great-grandmother came as an immigrant. They were farmers in rocky soil of Michigan. They had no oxen. My great-grandmother hitched herself up to the plow and pulled it because it's what needed to get done. And during the Depression, in March of 1933, the day my mother was born, My grandfather lost his job at a bank. Tough times like we've seen in the last 4 years. And for 2 years, he tried to find work and he couldn't find any. And my grandmother went back to work. She went to work to feed the family. And then she became a lobbyist for the Presbyterian Church on civil rights because she cared about children. She was on the Board of Education outside Chicago in the 1940s. She didn't like what she saw. She didn't like that this country was not standing up for all of our children. And she knew it to be wrong, and she got on that train every week and went to Washington to talk to people like the predecessors of Jim Clyburn and say, we must do better for our children, for the promise of this country to be true. We need to stand up and say, not good enough. We can do better. We will do better. And that's the time we're in right now. We're in a time where we must do better. And the choices are so very different right now. We have choices of values. Values about what we're grounded in, whether we are, I see it as the two roads, diverging in the woods. And one is standing with people, and particularly the bookends of our seniors, our parents and grandparents who built communities, who built our families, who played by the rules and worked hard, who have earned Medicare and Social Security, and now there's talk about, well, we can't afford that. We can't afford that. We should think about balancing that budget, which I will remind you is out of whack because we had 2 wars waged for 10 years that were put on a credit card. You know what? And you don't balance that on the backs of our seniors and our disabled. No, that's the wrong way to do it. That is the wrong way to do it. I will not let that be touched because it is wrong to walk away from the promise of Medicare and Social Security. That has done more to lift American seniors from poverty than any program ever devised. And the thought that we would walk away from that now is so wrong. I don't even begin to imagine the kind of thoughts that go through people's minds in doing that. So that's one end of the spectrum. And the other, Jason talked about so eloquently, what is the most precious resource any community, any family, any country has? I tell you, it's not your bank account. It's those precious children. And if we are going to be a great nation, a worthy nation, we must support our children. We must do better. We cannot abide the kind of achievement gap that we have in this state or any place in this nation. If we do not support and invest in every single child, that is the commitment of this country to make the American dream real. It's not some promise. It needs to be real. And it is real when we stand up and say we have to do better. We are going to demand that our schools perform for our children. Demand that it is not good enough to walk away and say, sorry, we're short some money and you're just going to have to make do. They are our future. And we owe it to them to stand strong by them. Now, in a moment, I don't believe I get the honor of introducing this great man. It's one of the amazing things when you run for Congress. And I'm a mom, I'm a lawyer by training, I've volunteered in my community. I never expected to be standing here. I've helped a lot of other people get elected, but my aha moment came in 2005. Some of you may have seen a grainy video clip of me, about 7 seconds, saying some kind of heated words in front of a town council in my town of Cheshire. And it was a Republican town council saying we shouldn't invest in education, we're going to slash the budget. I got a little hot under the collar. I'm a little passionate. And I clearly wasn't thinking about running for Congress when I said that. I would have been wearing my glasses and I probably would have been a little more moderate in my language. But I'm strong-willed, and if I see something that's wrong, I'm going to say something and do something. In 2005, I was saying something. I was saying something to my kids, reading the paper. We've all done it, thinking bad decisions. My daughter looked at me and said, Mom, you know that tone of voice, she was 15, Mom, you always told us, if you see a problem, you can fix it yourself. They've asked you to run, you could run. I'll run your campaign. But you should run or don't complain. And I said, I guess you're gonna run a campaign. And she was 15. And that is what brought me to where I am today. And that is why your participation on Tuesday matters so much. I'm gonna tell you a figure that may shock you. I know it shocked me, I know it shocked Jason. Jason was the one who shared it with me. 4 years ago, when Barack Obama energized so many of us, inspired so many of us, 2,000 of our fellow residents in Danbury got to the polls, cast their vote for Barack Obama, and did not vote for anybody else. They walked out the door. 2,000 votes. 2,000 votes. They came in the door to support our wonderful president and then left. In New Britain, that number was 1,500 who got to the polls and didn't continue to support the whole ballot. And so that's part of our challenge in the storm and everything else, is to realize that if you support the president, you need to give him a Congress he can work with, so that this gentleman who has fought for so long, and I hope you tell more of your story because it is so moving, is in the majority side, not the minority side, not fighting like we have been for the last 2 years of a Congress that has done nothing but say no, and another word I won't use, no, and another word I won't use. That is what they've done for 2 years. No, no, no. Make the president fail. That has been their agenda. Make our president fail. And you know what? They said it. Make the country fail. They don't, not only do they not care, it's better if you don't have a job, because then you'll be angry and maybe you'll blame the president. And I don't know about you, I don't think that's patriotic. I think it's quite something else to want to inflict pain on your friends and neighbors in the hopes it'll make the president of the United States fail. I'll say, not on our watch. We are not going to let that happen this time. We need to get the House of Representatives back to be able to help the president.